What if I told you that America's funniest woman died with a secret so devastating it destroyed her from the inside out? What if the woman who made 60 million people laugh every week spent 40 years hiding the biggest regret of her life? And what if, with only 8 days left to live, she walked onto Johnny Carson's stage and revealed a truth so painful that grown men in the studio openly wept? April 18, 1989, Lucille Ball sat across from Johnny Carson for the last time. What she confessed that night would change everything America thought they knew about success, about fame, about what really matters in life. This is the story of the night Lucille Ball broke down on live television and gave America the most important warning any celebrity has ever delivered. And what happened next stunned the entire nation. But before we get into this incredible story, I need to ask you something important. I see messages all the time in the comments section from some of you saying you didn't realize you weren't subscribed to this channel. So if you could do me a huge favor right now and double check if you're a subscriber, that would be tremendously appreciated. It's simple, it's free, and it's something that anybody who watches this channel frequently can do to help us keep everything going and keep this channel on the trajectory it's on. So please do double check if you've subscribed, and thank you so much. Because in a strange way, you are part of our history. You're on this journey with us, and I genuinely appreciate you for that. Now let's get into what happened that night, when Lucille Ball revealed her secret and why it changed millions of lives forever. Lucille Ball's hand was trembling. April 18, 1989. The Tonight Show studio at NBC Burbank. 300 people sat in that audience, completely unaware of what was about to happen. Millions more watched from their living rooms across America, and Lucille Ball, the woman who had made 60 million people laugh every single week for 40 years, was about to break down completely on live television. Johnny Carson sat across from her, sensing something was wrong. He had interviewed Lucy dozens of times over 3 decades. He knew her rhythms, her timing, her carefully crafted persona. But tonight something was different. The makeup couldn't hide what was happening to her. The cancer was winning. She had lost 30 pounds in 2 months. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. But Lucy had insisted on doing this interview. Nobody could talk her out of it, because she had a secret she had carried for 40 years. A secret that had destroyed her from the inside. And with only days left to live, she refused to die without telling the truth. What happened next would become the most replayed clip in Tonight Show history. Mental health professionals would use it in therapy sessions for decades, and Johnny Carson would later say it was the most heartbreaking moment in his entire 30-year career. If this story already has you hooked, drop a like right now and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from tonight. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this unfolds. Backstage at NBC Studios, 5:30 in the afternoon. Lucille Ball sat alone in her dressing room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The makeup artists had done their best, but they couldn't hide the truth. She was dying, and everyone knew it. "Miss Ball, we're ready for you in 5 minutes," a young production assistant said nervously, knocking gently on the door. The entire staff was terrified. This wasn't just any guest. This was Lucy, the woman who had basically invented the sitcom, the first woman to run a major television studio. An American icon. Down the hall, Johnny Carson was in his own dressing room, unusually quiet. His longtime producer had briefed him just an hour earlier. "Johnny, she's really sick. The doctors don't think she has much time. She specifically asked to see you. She said she has something important to say." Johnny had known Lucy for over 30 years. They'd become friends back when he was just starting out, and she was already a legend. He'd watched I Love Lucy reruns as a kid, memorizing every episode. Now he was about to interview her one final time, and something in his gut told him this would be different from every other interview he'd ever done. At 5:35, the studio doors opened. The audience filed in, buzzing with excitement. Lucy was scheduled as the first guest, and people were thrilled. Some had grown up watching I Love Lucy. Others knew her from Here's Lucy or The Lucy Show. Everyone expected to laugh. The Tonight Show audience always laughed when Lucy appeared, but when she walked onto that stage at 5:47, the laughter died in their throats. Lucy moved slowly, leaning heavily on a cane. She wore an elegant burgundy dress, and her signature red hair was perfectly styled. But something was terribly wrong. Her face looked gaunt, almost skeletal. Her famous smile seemed forced, painted on, and her eyes, those expressive eyes that had sparkled with mischief for 4 decades, looked haunted. The audience stood and applauded, but it wasn't their usual enthusiastic response. This ovation was different, quieter, more reverent. People were clapping for a legend, yes, but they were also saying goodbye. You could feel it in the air, the weight of finality. Johnny stood and walked from behind his desk to greet Lucy, something he rarely did. He took her hand gently, carefully, like she might break. He helped her into the guest chair, supporting her elbow as she lowered herself down. For a moment they just looked at each other. The cameras caught something raw passing between them. This wasn't host and guest. This was 2 old friends who both knew this was goodbye. "Lucy," Johnny said softly, his voice already thick with emotion. "Thank you for being here." "Where else would I be, Johnny?" Lucy replied, and the audience laughed, grateful for any moment of normalcy. "You've got the best seat in town." For the first 15 minutes, everything seemed fine, almost normal. Johnny asked about "I Love Lucy," and Lucy told the famous story about the chocolate factory scene, the one where she and Ethel couldn't keep up with the conveyor belt. The audience laughed, holding on to the familiar comfort of a story they'd heard before. She talked about working with Desi, carefully avoiding anything too personal. She was performing, doing what she'd done masterfully for 40 years, making people laugh while revealing absolutely nothing real about herself. The mask was still on, the armor still intact. But Johnny Carson had built his career on reading people. He could see through it. He could see her hands shaking in her lap. He could hear the slight tremor in her voice when she paused between sentences. He could see her fighting something, some massive emotion she was trying desperately to control. And then Johnny did something that changed everything. He deviated from his prepared questions. "Lucy," he said gently, leaning forward, "you've given us so much laughter over the years. What's given you joy?" The question hung in the air like a live wire. Lucy's smile faltered. Just for a second, but the cameras caught it. She looked down at her hands, studying them like she'd never seen them before. Then she looked back up at Johnny. The audience sensed the shift immediately. The energy in the studio changed. You could feel 300 people leaning forward in their seats. "Joy," she repeated quietly, almost like she was tasting the word for the first time. "You know, Johnny, that's an interesting question." She paused. The silence stretched. Millions of viewers across America leaned closer to their televisions. Something was happening, something real. "People think because you make them laugh, you must be happy," Lucy continued, her voice becoming softer, more vulnerable. "They think because you're successful, you must have everything you want. They think because you're famous, you must be fulfilled." Another pause. Longer this time. Johnny didn't interrupt. He knew something was coming, something important. "But what if I told you," Lucy said, her eyes beginning to glisten with tears, "that I spent my whole life making people laugh while I was dying inside?" The studio audience went completely silent. You could hear the cameras moving, the slight mechanical whir of the equipment. Someone in the back row coughed, and it echoed through the space. "What if I told you," Lucy continued, her voice cracking now, "that every smile you saw on TV was covering up the biggest regret of my entire life?" Johnny's face showed genuine shock. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't planned. Nobody had prepared him for this moment. Lucy's hands gripped the armrests of her chair, her knuckles turning white. A single tear rolled down her cheek, cutting through her carefully applied makeup like a crack in a dam. "Johnny," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "can I tell you something I've never told anyone publicly?" Johnny Carson, who had maintained professional composure through 30 years and over 20,000 interviews, could barely speak. His own eyes were filling with tears. "Of course, Lucy," he managed. "Anything." But what nobody in that studio expected, what would stun America and change how millions of people saw success forever, was what Lucy said next. "Stay with me. What happens in the next 60 seconds will leave you absolutely speechless." Lucy took a shaky breath. Her whole body seemed to be trembling now. The mask was coming off. The armor was cracking. and America was about to see the real Lucille Ball for the first time. "I'm dying," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "The cancer. The doctors give me maybe 2 weeks." The audience gasped. Some people started crying immediately, but Lucy held up her hand. "But that's not what I need to say," she continued. "That's not what I came here to tell you." She wiped her eyes roughly, smearing her mascara. She didn't care anymore about how she looked. She didn't care about the cameras or the millions watching. She only cared about the truth. "I need to talk about Desi." The audience gasped again, louder this time. Lucy and Desi Arnaz's divorce had been Hollywood legend. They had created the most successful show in television history together, then destroyed each other in one of the most bitter divorces of the 1960s. Lucy never spoke about it publicly. Never. She deflected questions about Desi for 30 years. But now, with nothing left to lose, she was ready to tell the truth. "Everyone thinks I left Desi because of his drinking, his infidelity, his gambling," Lucy said, her voice breaking. "And all of that was true. He did all those things. But that's not why our marriage really ended." She looked directly at Johnny, tears streaming freely now, makeup completely ruined. "I destroyed our marriage, Johnny. Not him, me." "Lucy, you don't have to." Johnny started, but she held up her hand. "Yes, I do," she said firmly, "because in 8 days I'll be gone. And if I don't say this now, I'll die with this regret eating me alive." She was fully crying now, her whole body shaking, but she kept going. "Desi asked me to quit the show," she said, each word seeming to cost her something. "Not at the beginning, but later, after our son was born, after we'd already made it. He begged me. He said, 'Lucy, we have enough money. Let's just be a family. Let's watch our kids grow up. Let's travel. Let's live.'" The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming in the background. "And I said no," Lucy continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "I said no because I loved the fame more than I loved him." Johnny was openly crying now, not even trying to hide it. Several audience members were sobbing. The camera operators were wiping their eyes. This wasn't television anymore. This was something else entirely. "I loved the applause more than I loved our family," Lucy said, her voice raw with pain. "I chose being Lucy Ricardo over being Lucy Arnaz, and it destroyed everything." Lucy looked down at her hands again, and when she looked back up, her face was a portrait of devastation. Pure, unfiltered grief. "Desi died in 1986, she said, 3 years ago, and you know what his last words to me were?" Johnny shook his head, unable to speak. "I visited him in the hospital 2 days before he died," Lucy continued. "He was so weak, he could barely lift his hand. But he reached for me, and he took my hand in his, and he looked at me with those eyes, those beautiful eyes that I fell in love with when I was just a girl." She completely broke down, her shoulders shook with sobs. Johnny moved his chair closer and took her hand, just holding it while she cried. "He said," Lucy gasped between sobs. "He said, 'Lucy, I never stopped loving you, not for one single day.'" The entire studio was crying now. Not just tears, but full body shaking sobs. The audience, the crew, Johnny, everyone. The makeup artists in the wings were holding each other. The camera operators had tears streaming down their faces while they tried to keep their shots steady. "And I realized," Lucy said, fighting to get the words out. "I realized that I had thrown away the love of my life for what? For a TV show, for fame, for people to know my name." She looked directly into the camera, directly at the millions of people watching from their homes. "Desi is gone," she said, her voice cracking on every word. "My children barely know me because I was always working. I have 3 Emmy Awards and a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame." She paused, and the next words came out like a confession, like a prayer, like a warning. "And I would trade every single one of them for one more day with the man I loved." The weight of those words settled over the studio like a blanket. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. But what Lucy said next would change everything. What she was about to reveal would reach millions of people and save marriages, reunite families, and force an entire generation to reconsider what success really means. Don't go anywhere. The most powerful moment is still coming. Lucy composed herself enough to continue. though tears continued streaming down her face. She pulled a tissue from her pocket and wiped her eyes, but it didn't matter. The mascara was ruined, the makeup was gone, the carefully constructed image of Lucille Ball had completely crumbled. What remained was just Lucy. Raw, broken, real. "Do you know what I did 2 weeks after Desi died?" she asked Johnny, her voice hoarse from crying. Johnny shook his head, holding her hand tighter. "I went to his house," Lucy said. "Our old house, the one where we lived when we were happy, when the kids were little, when we would stay up all night talking about our dreams." She took a shaky breath. "I stood in the driveway, and I screamed at the sky. I screamed, why didn't I say yes? Why didn't I just say yes when he asked me to choose him?" She covered her face with her hands, her voice muffled. "I've had 3 years to think about this. 3 years of waking up every morning knowing I made the worst decision of my life. And now I'm dying and I can't fix it. I can't go back. I can't tell Desi I'm sorry. I can't tell him he was right. I can't tell him that every single award, every magazine cover, every moment of fame meant absolutely nothing compared to losing him." Johnny couldn't speak. He just held her hand and cried with her. Behind the cameras, the director was making frantic signals, but nobody was paying attention. This moment was bigger than television. This moment was sacred. "The night before Desi died," Lucy continued, her voice barely audible now, "he told me something else. He said, 'Lucy, don't make our mistake. Tell people, tell everyone, choose love, choose family. Don't let them choose fame over what matters.'" She looked up at Johnny with devastated eyes. "He made me promise," she whispered, "and I've been too much of a coward to keep that promise until now." Then Lucy did something that shocked everyone. She turned away from Johnny and faced the camera directly, addressing the 20 million people watching from their homes. "If you have someone you love and you're putting work first," she said, her voice gaining strength, "stop. Just stop." Lucy's words became more urgent, more desperate. She was speaking to America now, not as a celebrity, but as a dying woman with nothing left to lose and everything she needed to say. "If you're missing your kids' baseball games for meetings, stop," she continued, her voice breaking. "If you're choosing a promotion over your marriage, stop. If you're telling yourself just one more year, just one more deal, just one more achievement, stop." She pointed at the camera, at the millions of invisible faces watching. "I'm Lucille Ball," she said. "I'm one of the most famous women in the world. I've been on magazine covers. I've won every award. I built an empire. I changed television forever." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was raw with pain. "And I'm telling you that none of it, absolutely none of it, is worth losing the people you love." Her voice broke completely, becoming almost a sob. "Desi and I created the most successful show in television history. We had everything. Money, fame, success, power. We had everything." She looked down at her hands. "And I threw it away because I was afraid that if I stopped performing, people would forget about me." She looked back up at the camera, tears streaming. "Well, guess what? They will forget about me. In 50 years, maybe 100, nobody will care about I Love Lucy. The show will be a footnote in history books. The episodes will gather dust. Nobody will remember Lucy Ricardo." Her next words came out like a confession torn from her soul. "But Desi would have loved me forever. My children would have had a mother, and I wouldn't be sitting here dying and alone with nothing but regrets." The studio erupted, not in applause but in sobs. Grown men were weeping openly. Women in the audience were holding each other, crying into each other's shoulders. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a dying woman's final confession, and everyone watching knew they were witnessing something that would change them forever. Johnny Carson put his face in his hands and cried like he'd never cried on television before. His shoulders shook. His careful composure, maintained through 30 years of broadcasting, completely shattered. Lucy looked at him through her tears and whispered, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to fall apart like this." "Don't apologize," Johnny said through his tears, his voice choked. "Don't you dare apologize for telling the truth." But what happened next was completely spontaneous. What Johnny did in that moment would become one of the most replayed moments in television history. "Stay with me. You need to see this." Johnny Carson stood up. He walked around his desk, something he almost never did during interviews. The cameras followed him as he sat down on the couch next to Lucy, right beside her. And then he did something that shocked everyone watching. He put his arm around her shoulders. Lucy turned into him and cried into his jacket, like a child crying on a parent's shoulder. Johnny just held her, not saying anything, not trying to fix it, just being present in her pain. The cameras kept rolling, capturing one of the most intimate moments in television history. The audience stood as one. They weren't applauding. They were witnessing. They were honoring. They were grieving with her. The standing ovation went on for 3 full minutes while Lucy sobbed in Johnny's arms. People in the audience were reaching toward the stage as if trying to somehow hold her, comfort her, tell her she wasn't alone. When Lucy finally lifted her head, Johnny handed her his handkerchief. She took it, wiped her eyes, and tried to smile. It was weak, broken, but it was real. "Lucy," Johnny said softly, his own voice still thick with emotion. "Desi knew you loved him. I promise you he knew." "How can you be sure?" Lucy asked, her voice like a child's, vulnerable and desperate for reassurance. "Because love like that doesn't disappear just because people get divorced," Johnny said, and his words carried the weight of someone who understood pain, who had lived through his own failures and regrets. "He waited for you. He loved you until his last breath. He knew, Lucy. Trust me, he knew." Lucy nodded, unable to speak. She looked out at the audience, then back at the camera. When she spoke again, her voice was hoarse from crying, but it carried a power that made everyone listening stop and truly hear. "Please," she said, looking directly into the lens, directly at the invisible millions watching. "Please don't make my mistake." She took a shaky breath. "Go home tonight, right after this show ends. Go home and tell the people you love that they matter more than anything. Hug your children, hold your spouse, look them in the eyes and tell them they're more important than your job, your ambitions, your dreams of success." Her voice gained strength. "Choose them," she said firmly. "Choose love. Always choose love." Johnny helped Lucy stand. She was shaky on her feet, exhausted from the emotional outpouring. As they walked slowly toward the stage exit, Lucy leaned heavily on his arm, but just before she disappeared from view, she stopped. She turned back one final time. The audience held its breath. "And Johnny," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "thank you for letting me tell the truth. Finally." Johnny's voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you for trusting me with it, Lucy, and thank you for giving us the greatest gift anyone can give, the truth about what really matters." Lucy smiled, a real smile this time, and walked off the stage for the last time. 8 days later, on April 26, 1989, Lucille Ball died of a heart attack. She was 77 years old. But what happened after her death proved that her final interview had changed everything. Stay with me for the ending. You need to hear what happened next. The response to Lucy's final interview was unprecedented. Within hours of the broadcast, NBC's switchboard was overwhelmed. They received over 400,000 letters in the following month. But these weren't fan letters. These were confessions. These were stories. These were lives changed. A businessman in Chicago wrote, "I watched Lucy's interview on a Thursday night. On Friday morning, I quit my job. I'd been missing my daughter's entire childhood for a career that meant nothing. Lucy's words saved my family." A woman from Atlanta sent a letter. "I was planning to leave my husband for a promotion that required relocating. After watching Lucy, I turned down the job. We're still together. Thank you, Lucy, for showing me what mattered." A veteran from Texas wrote, "I hadn't spoken to my son in 7 years because of a stupid argument about my grandchildren. Lucy's words broke something open in me. I called him the next morning. We're rebuilding our relationship. I would have died with that regret if not for her courage." The letters kept coming, thousands of them, stories of reconciliation, stories of changed priorities, stories of people choosing love over success, family over fame, presence over achievement. Mental health organizations reported a 30% increase in people seeking therapy in the month following the broadcast. Marriage counselors across the country saw waiting lists triple. Lucy's breakdown had given people permission to admit their own struggles, their own regrets, their own fears about the choices they were making. Johnny Carson spoke at Lucy's funeral. The church was packed with Hollywood legends. But Johnny's words weren't about show business. They weren't about ratings or awards or achievements. "She spent 40 years making us laugh," Johnny said, his voice breaking. "But in her final interview, she gave us something more valuable than laughter. She gave us permission to admit our regrets. She gave us the courage to choose differently. She saved marriages. She brought families together. That was Lucy's real legacy. Not the sitcoms, not the awards, not the fame. Her legacy is every person who watched that interview and decided to go home and hug their family a little tighter." Today, that interview is preserved in the Library of Congress as a cultural artifact. It's shown in marriage counseling sessions across America. It's used in business ethics classes at universities. It's played in grief therapy groups. Professors use it to teach about authentic communication. Therapists use it to help clients understand regret and forgiveness. Lucy's breakdown became her most important performance, not because it was entertaining, but because it was true. 20 years after that interview, Johnny Carson gave his own final interview before his death in 2005. The reporter asked him about the most memorable moment of his 30-year career. "Lucy," Johnny said without hesitation. "Lucy's final interview. I've interviewed presidents. I've talked to kings and movie stars and the greatest comedians who ever lived. But nothing mattered more than that night with Lucy, because that wasn't television. That was a human being facing death, trying to save other people from making her mistakes. That was love in its purest form." The reporter asked, "What did you learn from that night?" Johnny was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his words were careful, deliberate. "I learned that success means nothing if you're alone. I learned that fame is empty if you've sacrificed the people who loved you before you were famous. I learned that the truest measure of a life isn't the awards you win or the money you make. It's whether the people you love know they matter more than anything else." He paused, and his next words seemed to carry the weight of everything he'd learned in 79 years of life. "Lucy died with regrets," he said softly, "but because she was brave enough to share them, millions of people changed their lives. They chose love over fame. They chose family over fortune. They chose presence over success. That's legacy. That's what matters." Emily Warren, the little girl who brought her father's letter to Johnny, later wrote to Lucy's daughter after hearing about the interview. She was grown by then, working as a grief counselor herself. "Your mother taught me something my father tried to teach Johnny Carson," Emily wrote, "that the people who make us laugh are often carrying the heaviest burdens, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let people see your pain, because your pain might save someone else." Lucy's children, Lucy Arnaz and Desi Arnaz Jr., released a statement 5 years after their mother's death. "For 40 years we knew our mother as Lucy Ricardo, as a performer, as an icon, but in her final interview we finally met Lucy Arnaz, our mother, the woman who carried regrets and pain and love that she never knew how to express. We're grateful she found the courage to be real, even if it came at the end, and we're grateful that her honesty helped other families choose differently." Desi Arnaz Jr. added in a separate interview, "I think my father would have been proud of her. He would have said, 'That's my Lucy,' finally telling the truth, because that's all he ever wanted. Just her, just the truth, just love." Today, there's a scholarship fund established in Lucy and Desi's names. It's for children whose parents are divorced, to help them afford therapy and support services. The fund was established by people who watched that final interview and wanted to honor Lucy's message. The inscription on the scholarship materials reads, "In memory of Lucille Ball, who taught us that success means nothing if we lose the people we love along the way." If you're watching this right now, Lucy's message is for you. If you're choosing your career over your family, she's speaking to you. If you're missing moments with your children because of work, she's warning you. If you're telling yourself just one more year, just one more promotion, just one more achievement, she's begging you to stop. Because Lucille Ball, one of the most successful women in American history, died alone with regrets, and with her final breath she tried to save you from making the same mistake. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't wait until you're dying to tell the truth. Don't wait until the people you love are gone to realize they were all that mattered. Choose love. Choose presence. Choose the people who will remember you not for what you achieved, but for how you made them feel. That's Lucy's legacy. That's her final gift to all of us. If this story moved you, if Lucy's words reached something deep inside you, do something about it today, not tomorrow, not next week, today. Call someone you love. Tell them they matter. Apologize for the times you chose work over them. Make the choice Lucy wished she had made. Subscribe to this channel for more true stories that reveal what really matters in life. Share this video with someone who needs to hear Lucy's message, someone who's making the same mistakes she made, someone who still has time to choose differently. Drop a comment and tell me, where are you watching from? And what's one thing you're going to change after hearing Lucy's story? Because Lucille Ball died with regrets, but she made sure that her pain would save others. That's the greatest legacy anyone can leave. Choose love. Always choose love. That's what Lucy would tell you if she were here today. Don't wait until it's too late to listen.